Hello, welcome everyone. I am Amy Souza. Some of you will probably already know me as Known Heretic. I'm going to go ahead and share this momentarily. I'll probably cut this part out later where I share my stream with you so that I can invite people to come along and watch what is going on. I'm just going to go over here to my stream and send a little invite to this link and tell people that it is live now. So we'll wait for a few more people to join. Welcome those of you who are here. I just sent a post to my Twitter. I'm just going to send a post to my Facebook to let people know this is happening, so people can join. I just was feeling in a nice mood today. I don't know how everyone did yesterday for the full moon. I don't know how many people track how they feel on the full moon. I had kind of a weird full moon myself. I did not feel my best yesterday, but I'm feeling much more myself today. Or I guess I felt myself yesterday. It was just a part of myself that I was uncomfortable feeling. But I'm feeling in a much more comfortable place today. And I want to do a little live about connecting the dots. So this is really going to be a brief live to talk about some of these connections that we can make between identity and intuition. So I kind of want to pick this apart because I don't know how much I have actually spoken about my background. And I think some of you, see me in my activism. You see me critiquing gender. You see some of the things that I say about it online and on Twitter. I know a number of you have watched some of my YouTubes, but I don't know. I don't know if I've ever really gone and really sort of parsed out this connection for my audience. Oh, Daniela, I'm sorry that you're feeling sad. This is a friend speaking from Facebook. There's a couple of different streams following me. And I feel you, sister. It is okay to feel your feelings. It is good to feel your feelings. Not all of our feelings are our favorite feelings, but the hard part is feeling them, and the good part is feeling them. The nourishing part is feeling them. But I'm gonna go a little bit more into this later. I want to give us all a little setup, and then I'm gonna parse this out for everyone. So I want to build into this connection of talking about identity as we see it in the politics that we see in the world, in the activism that we do. And I want to kind of put this in perspective with the intuition. So, a lot of you know that I speak from a perspective of embodiment. I really try to underline why the intuition and our sense perceptions and embodiment are one safeguarding tools. These are tools that literally protect us and keep us safe. Um, but I kind of want to talk about really how I came to some of those values, and really what else those values are good for. Because of course our sense perceptions and our instincts, these are our literal protectors. And I believe I've said this in videos before. One way that you can think about your sense perceptions as keeping you safe is to think about how you put your hand on a hot pan and your hand recoils. That literal sensation of touching the hot pan, the feeling of heat sends a signal way back to that oldest part of your brain, that reptilian part of your brain. And your instinct, which keeps you safe, is to recoil. Now, all of our sensations are there to keep us safe. So, our physical sensations are there to keep us safe, and our other sensations, our visual cues are there to keep us safe. And again, in the activism, we talk about how important it is to trust your sensations. This is that Little Red Riding Hood message that I bring up again and again and again when she sees, what big eyes you have, what big ears you have. She's starting to understand that the wolf is not her grandmother. He is not who he says he is. And she has to use her sense perceptions to recognize this. So, again, this is a safeguarding tool, but it's more. So, it's a safeguarding tool in that we trust our eyes, we trust our ears to recognize what is in front of us. And we need to be able to be grounded in order to protect ourselves. But all of our sensations are giving us this information. Our emotions are also sensations. They are slightly different than our physical sensations, but our emotions are also a guidance system, and they're there to keep us safe. So that's why I opened with a little bit of that for some of you who missed my intro. Our emotions are there as well to bring us back and to help us find equilibrium. Of course, our emotions are a lot harder for us because we have a lot more cognitive judgments about our emotions. We don't judge our sensations as much. Sometimes we still judge our sensations. We might judge ourselves for being old if we wake up with a creak in our back or in our feet. So we do sometimes have judgments about our sensations, but we have a lot more judgments about our emotions. But they're also a guidance system. So I think of some of the emotions that I have in this activism. Often we have emotions of being angry, of being depressed, of being overwhelmed, of being sad. And these emotions are here helping us to sort our way out. I'm angry that children are being harmed. I'm angry that women are losing boundaries around their bodies. And this anger is a guidance system. This is telling me that what I see out in the world is not right. It is incongruent with my internal integrity. It is incongruent with what I know to be right. Yeah, Daniela, it's so true. Little Red Riding Hood is such an old story. It was written way back in the 1600s. So that story exists as one of the oldest stories we have about trusting your sense perceptions and trusting your instincts. It's a really important one. So I also want to go in this direction. So I'm glad you brought up Little Red Riding Hood because I want to talk about image versus words. Okay. And I want to talk about story versus psychology. So some of you may know I have a course coming up called Women Who Run with the Wolves. I don't know if all of you are familiar with that book. But I am going to be doing a course on women who run with the wolves. Where I will be taking women through a study of that. Hold on, I'm going to write this down. I'm putting in a banner so that so I can tell you about that in a bit. This is on my website for those of you who don't know. And let's see. Yeah, there we go. And I want it to be that color. Yeah. So story. So this book, Little Women Who Run with the Wolves. One of the things about it is that it really talks about, it uses story And she mentions in the book that story comes before psychology. And to me, this is to say that image comes before words. And this again is to say that our sensations are primary. So to say that image comes before words is to remind ourselves that image is primary. Our sensations are primary. Our sensations are our primary way of knowing the world. And our brain has these different portions. We have that oldest portion, which is that basal ganglia, what they call the reptilian brain. That is the part of the brain that does instincts, that does sensations, physical sensations, fight or flight, hunger, sexual reproduction, desiring to have sex. Then we have the mammalian brain, which is slightly younger, but still quite an old part of the brain. And that is the part of the brain that does our other sensations, that does pattern recognition, that does noticing, seeing, hearing, and puts these patterns together. This is the part of the brain that, during our hunting and gathering phase, this is the part of the brain that noticed, oh, these berries are always in this part of the forest, and my brain is making a mental map of how to find it. Or the caribou always come at this part of the year, so at this part of the year we have to be in this location. This is the pattern recognition part of the brain. And John Berger, this is a little book called Ways of Seeing. And he says in this book, he reminds us that seeing comes before words. The child looks and recognizes before it can speak. And that's the oldest, the newest part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. That is the language center. That is the rational, the logical, the analytical brain. That is the brain that does abstract logic. So that is the oldest part of the brain, and it's the slowest part of the brain. So this is all, of course, I'm going to wrap this all into identity politics and the intuition, but I want to really sort out for us how primary our inner awarenesses are, our pattern recognition, our sense perceptions. These are in very old parts of the brain, and that forward part of the brain is much newer, and it's much slower. So if you think about it, when I say that image becomes words before words, when John Berger says image comes before words, we see before we say. Children learn to see and recognize the face of their parents before they can say anyone's name, before they can say mama or daddy. They can do facial recognition. They do pattern recognition because that's a much faster part of the brain than the brain that creates language. The part of the brain that creates language, and language itself, is abstracting. So when we use an alphabetic language system, we are participating in an abstraction. Now, this is it's neither bad nor good. It just is. It's just a thing that we do and we can do. And in fact, it is very useful because it's how we're communicating right now. We can do it. But this abstracting is much slower. It's linear, it's sequential. So to create a word in my brain, to create this sentence, the words to and create and this and sentence, you have to parse out those letters. You have to put those letters into ideas. You have to look at those ideas in a linear, one at a time sequence. And then you have to look at that whole sequence and put the whole thing together to form a concept out of it. So that's ultimately, I mean, it does happen quite quickly in our brain, but compared to the other part of the brain, compared to the part of the brain that's doing pattern recognition and facial recognition, it's a much slower part of the brain. So these primary awarenesses, I want to read sort of the next sentence that Berger says here. He says, There is also another sense in which seeing comes before words. It is seeing which establishes our place in the surrounding world. We explain the world with words, but words can never undo the fact that we are surrounded by it. Oh, I'm seeing that comments are coming and I wasn't looking at that part. Hello, Furious Female, and hello, May, and you're welcome for the coverage for the last couple days. Part of doing that live stream yesterday is what has inspired me to have this talk today, because this is something, one, it's something that's always on my mind, how identity politics are playing out. And it's also playing out in my mind constantly, how the abstraction, the way that we have abstracted identity above our own embodiment, has taken us away from our senses and our instincts. So this is really the path that I'm taking you all on right now, is to bring it back, to make that connection of what is happening in our brain when we are conceptualizing identity as external from our embodiment, and what it's doing. So he just says here, I'm going to repeat that again. We can explain the world without words. Yeah, we can explain that. Oh, sorry, I'm getting it wrong. We can explain the world with words, but words can never undo the fact that we are surrounded by it. So there's something really interesting, I guess, sinister, you might say, at work, with those who are trying to unmoor the word woman from the embodiment of being a woman. So so that's what's happening. So they're taking a word woman, which refers to a kind of a physical developmental process. It involves a whole process of development. Becoming a woman, technically starts at our menses. I mean, of course, in the United States, it's when you turn 18. But physically, it's when we reach physical maturation, and then we continue to mature up, all the way through perimenopause and postmenopause, all the way until our death. It's a process. It's not one fixed thing. Being a woman isn't a fixed thing. It's a process. It's a development. It's a physical experience. So our opponents on the other side are trying to take this physicality and abstract it, create an abstract identity out of it. So one, that is dissociative from embodied experience. It's an abstraction. It's a conceptualization happening in this part of the brain. It has nothing to do with this part of the brain, the main part of the brain, which is the pattern recognition part of the brain. It doesn't have to do with what we see. It's dissociated from our senses. It's a conceptualization that can only be imagined in the abstract world, just like, as I was speaking about, language is itself a kind of abstraction. So I am talking about language to sort of underline the fact that we have all sort of been taught how to abstract, because we've all grown up with an alphabetic language system. So it does teach our brain how to do this trick. But it's just a tool. It's a trick. It's a tool. It's a way ultimately to talk about our direct experience. So what Berger is saying in this quote is that you can use language to talk about experience, but language can never undo what that experience is. So even if they take this word away from us, even if they try to adapt and change the word woman, it doesn't change that there is still a kind of a unique being who is a human adult, who is on a particular developmental pathway, one of creating large immobile gametes and their production, whether or not her body actually produces them. That is the design and function of her body. So this abstraction that these identitarians are trying to do, they can't take us away from that grounding. And no matter what they do with words, they can take away the word that we use to describe our unique physicality, but they can't undo the fact that we are unique on our own. um Wait, I want to see this. So, when I was at WDI, one woman said she went to a woman's space at 12, and they call them all women and that they love that. Yeah, we used to have these rituals that were rites of passage. So, girls used to have a rite of passage ritual, like a red tent ritual, that when you got your menses, your mother or grandmothers or aunties would take you all on your own and bring you into this ritual and bring you along. But we've lost a lot of these rites of passage rituals. So, okay, there's a few things I want to cover. So I covered how image comes before words. I really wanted to cover that. And I wanted to cover that seeing comes before saying. and and in this sort of notion of seeing comes before saying, this applies to all of our senses. So, whether you are, it doesn't, you can be blind and this concept still applies. So even if you are literally blind and you cannot see, you sense before you say. We experience the world on the sensation level first. Our senses are primary to our conceptualization of speaking those sensations. So before I say I feel hot or I feel cold or this is beautiful, this landscape is beautiful. I'm looking out the windows. There's woods in front of me. Before I say that, I experience it. My sensations are primary. I would have no cause to say I am hot or I am cold or this is beautiful or I don't like it here, if I wasn't experiencing my sensations first, and my words are a response to those sensations. So I also want to say this is a way of saying that our perceptions are precognitive. And again, all of those perceptions are happening in this older part of the brain, much older than our prefrontal cortex. Our sensations, our perceptions, are what we notice, and it's prior to cognition. And that's why something like what happened to my friend Julie at the YMCA, it's so important to recognize, because she was in the shower. She's naked in the shower behind a flimsy curtain, and she hears a man's voice and then responds. She doesn't, we don't conceptualize like, what kind of a person is that person? I don't know. I have to think my way into this. No, we respond to what we hear, what we sense. I mean, in that case, she didn't even see him yet. She responded to hearing him. She heard him. She knew a man was in her space. She responded to her sensations. So this is the thing about the identitarians. They want to dissociate us from responding to our sensations. They want us to conceptualize. They want her to go out as she did. She went out, she saw that this man was dressed in a woman's bathing suit, and they want us to be in our conceptualizing function. Oh, I see that he is in a woman's costume. So I have to mentally analyze, oh, he must be saying that he is a woman identity. But this is all an analysis. It's a mental analysis. And the point is, for women, for children, for safeguarding, we should not have to mentally analyze men's style choices. We shouldn't have to do that. And we should not also, again, this is, as I said earlier, this is kind of a response to the pediatric protests that we saw yesterday. Children shouldn't have to be dissociated for their own bodies. They shouldn't have to think about whether they are a boy or a girl. They should be grounded in feeling their own bodies and feeling the sensation and development of their own bodies. And we are creating a sense for them of that they are this, in essence, a ghost in the machine. I think you've all heard that phrase. This ghost in the machine feeling where you're dissociated. And this is ultimately, this is very uncomfortable. It's troubling. So when we are dissociated from our bodies and our sensations, it's quite troubling. Pinwheel. So I did two lives. I meant to do one, but the feed cut out. So I there's two live streams, just so you know, on my YouTube for the Anaheim event. And then Rev Fox covered the there was, at the very end of the day, they did a what do you call it, press conference. So Rev Fox covered that press conference, but mine covers the rally before the event. And I'm going to make an aside here to say, oh, Judy, you were at the Anaheim rally. That's so cool. So I wish you had got on my screen. I wish you had got there. But I interviewed Gay Chapman, Gays Against Groomers, Chloe Cole, Abel Garcia, Abigail Martinez, who is the mom who lost her daughter to this. Aaron Brewer was there. I interviewed Joey Bright. I interviewed shoot, I'm missing some people. Jennifer of Partners for Ethical Care and Jeanette from Partners for Ethical Care. Exelancic, I interviewed. I interviewed the Truthful Therapist. She was there. So Belissa Cohen was there. So many. Charlie, Aaron, who, God, I'm forgetting her last name. Aaron, who helped organize the event, and I'm blanking on her last name, and that's silliness. She's a D-Trans Awareness on Twitter. I remember that much. But I interviewed her there. So it was a really great event, and the event was protesting the pediatric clinic. So it was protesting child medicalization. Yeah, the incredible thing about children is how naturally embodied they are. And we're interfering with that a lot earlier than we have in the past, with the insistence that they intellectualize their natural embodied responses to things. I wonder what the long-term impact of this dissociation will be. Yeah, and that is it is absolutely terrifying what we're doing, because we're forcing them to think of themselves in the abstract. Now, this is the very thing that the phenomenologists, who are a kind of philosophy that I love, they fought against, because to think of yourself as a mind without a body, this is very old, and I thought we debunked this a long time ago. This is very Cartesian, to say that I think, therefore I am. This is Cartesian. But if you this is funny, if you think about it, you will notice that your senses are primary. So conceptualize this. But we are born on this planet, and all we can do when we are born is sense. We are hungry, we are thirsty, we want touch, we seek comfort, we are cold, we are hot, we have sensations coming to us that we are processing, and those sensations are how we come to understand ourselves and understand that we are ourselves, we are our bodies, and we are ourselves in relation to a physical material world. all of this understanding comes through the notion, through the realization, through the understanding of our primary sense perceptions. So this is primary. This is how we develop as tiny baby humans into grown humans. We begin to understand more and more about our own physicality and our relationship to the world. um yeah, Orwell warned us about authorities telling us to ignore the evidence of our senses, and it's happening now. It's that book is terrifying, and that we are basically living it. And we do see, there are great books. I actually brought a bunch of my books down here today in case I wanted to talk about it. Winnicott, Piaget. There's a couple of other great therapists who talk about child development. Also, Gina Rapon, in her book about brain development, talks about how detrimental it is to a child to be dissociated from the touch of an adult. And we saw this in the Romanian, in maybe this was in the sort of 70s, 80s. They all of those Romanian orphanages where those children had no sense of touch. They had a very hard time developing intimacy and relationship later on in life because they skipped that primary developmental stage of touch and connection and intimacy building. So it left them bereft. It left them incapacitated to develop some of these other skills. Yeah, their brains didn't fully develop, exactly because they needed these sensations in order to complete that development. And I think, Catherine, your question that you asked earlier is so important, because I do think what we are putting kids through in conceptually dissociating them from the notion of their own bodies, we are going to see some kids who are bereft of some skills that they need. And my supposition, although we don't have enough information to know this yet, but this is just my supposition out of my own expertise, is that this dissociation from the body creates a lack of bodily autonomy. Because how do kids developmentally build bodily autonomy? Okay, how do kids build bodily autonomy? They build, one of the primary ways they build autonomy over their own body is being able to name their own senses. So that's why in that language acquisition phase you see kids doing that whole see and say, or point and say, or see and say, whatever you want to call it, where they're like, I see a bird, or that's a doggy, or that's I see a tree, or just like, what's that? Just what's that? Kids often will just ask, what's that? They're curious because they are trying to understand what these things are so that they can have autonomy over the world. Because part of that, I point at it, I say what I see. That is saying, I claim what my senses see. I see something, and then my parent is reflecting back that you are accurate. What you have noticed, what you have felt, or what you have noticed, or what you have sensed is accurate. So I'm learning in that process. A child is learning to trust their own senses. They are learning to trust their own sense of reality and how to name the reality around them. So then they're doing this as young as preschool. They're going into classrooms and they're saying, like, Tom is a boy and Jill is a girl. And a teacher is saying, no, you cannot know that. You have no way of knowing if Tom is a boy or a girl, or if Jill is a boy or a girl. You can't know that. So the teacher is telling them, you actually can't trust your own senses. You cannot trust your own body. And I don't think, ultimately, I don't think teachers who are doing this are evil, but I do not think they are thinking about developmentally what they are doing to our students when they are doing this. They're not thinking about the fact that they are telling kids, you can't trust your own eyes and ears. And I think of the teachers who are doing it about themselves, where they're like, Miss Amy is a girl. And then I would say to them, "No, I'm not a girl. I'm a they." Like, what in the hell crazy abstract concept is that? And then the kid has to be like, "Oh, I can't believe what's in my eyes. I can't believe what I see. I can't believe what I hear because the teacher, the authority just corrected me and told me that she is a they, and I have to do this abstraction, this gymnastics." Alicia, I don't know how they can not think that it's harmful. It seems so clearly obvious to me that they would understand. I don't understand how anyone is, if anyone is a teacher. I mean, I was a teacher before. I went through Teach for America. I didn't end up going and getting my teaching degree, but I've done a lot of study in the field of early childhood development, and I don't see most teachers go through a phase where they have to learn early childhood development. So I don't understand how you go through early childhood development and miss this. It's very frustrating for me, and you can tell from my voice that I'm getting very animated about it because I get very animated about it. um and they are perhaps too stupid, and they are perhaps too preoccupied, so they are in their, being a good person preoccupation with the goodness of identity, because there is a lot of sloganeering around this notion. Yeah, I hear you, Alicia. I have my master's degree, and I'm probably one of the people who has the absolute most critiques about the field of psychology itself. And this is why I do tend to especially critique some more of the clinical and behavioral fields of psychology. And I do tend to like more some of the archetypal and Gestalt type psychologies. But all of these psychologies, I would say, are abstracting. So that actually leads to a bit of another point that I wanted to make. So I have been doing, I am starting, it's my classes are going to start this Wednesday, and they're open for anyone who still wants to come, but I want to, this is important to this conversation. So in the book Women Who Runs with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes says this really cool thing, because she is an archetypal psychologist, or Jungian. She's actually a Jungian. She's specifically a Jungian analyst. But there's a lot of archetype involved in Jung's work. And she makes this really interesting point. So she says story is far older than the art and science of psychology, and will always be the elder in the equation, no matter how much time passes. So this is to say, she is saying a couple of things that I want to parse out for us. So she's one saying that no, Gestalt is not where they believe the moon is sentient. Gestalt is just a way of saying all at once. So Gestalt is a kind of therapy where they try to consider, rather than like there's that kind of scientific psychology that was really in a fad when psychology was a newer science, and they tried to do all of those psychological experiments, like the kind of experiments they do on lab rats or with monkeys, where they tried to look at behaviors in the singular. So they would take all these mice and they would run them through a maze, or they would try to teach them, how to like take the water, and they would try to extrapolate how behavior works based on these really specific experimentations. Now, it's not to say these things don't have their use value, but what the Gestaltists did is to say this like looking at things in a lab in itty bitty parts doesn't actually tell us anything about the holism of psychology. It doesn't tell us about, the ecosystem of one's psyche. So in order to understand this, you have to understand it as a whole, not just in little parts. So I'm not quite keeping up with the comments. So I'm going to look back at these. Yes, American psychology is very far behind, and American psychology is really way too tied up. And I think you'll probably agree with me, Alicia. American psychology is way too tied up with the pharmaceutical industry. So they are really tied to looking at mental symptoms and then solving those mental symptoms with medication. So there's a lot of it's a really chemical psychology, you could say, in a lot of ways. I'm going to say this: these activist teachers view validation and affirmation as virtues, yes, above objective truth and accuracy. That is definitely related to postmodernism, and it's related to this symptom of forced positivity. So those words, validation, affirmation, inclusivity, all of those words are for kindness. Kindness you see all the time. These are forced positive. This is actually a totalitarian mechanism, where positivity is used to create a wedge. So all of those words are a wedge created to destroy embodiment and to destroy boundaries, because ultimately everything that is embodied has a boundary. This glass is a boundary, and that is why it can contain waters. Boundaries contain and they separate. In the material universe, everything is bounded, but in an abstract conceptualized place, boundaries are not required. Thanks, Beatrix, for being here. We appreciate you. Okay, so I was losing my point. The DSM is that, yes, thank you. American healthcare is damned. Yes, thank you. There's a pill for everything. Exactly. So to go back to the point about story being the elder. So I want to make 2 points of that. So oral history, listening and learning from our elders, this is prior to words. It's prior to I mean, it's not prior to words. I guess oral history is not prior to words, but it's prior to to a clinicalization of our psychology. We understood through story, we understood through images, and those images are are containers, in a sense, just as much as that glass is a container, and the images hold much more than the literal. Okay, so if we go to the story of Little Red Riding Hood, for example, her little red hood holds, as an image, it holds more than the literal. So on the one hand, it's a piece of clothing, but on the other hand, the little red hood is very clitoral. It tells you about a prepubescent girl. It speaks of what is vulvic and clitoral and red, and it gives you this notion, even though you don't think of it in a rational place per se. You are absorbing the feeling, the sense of it, through this pattern recognition. Okay, another example would be, Little Red Riding Hood gets devoured by the wolf, and then the axeman, the woodsman, the huntsman comes and chops him up, and she pops out and she's alive. Okay, so again, in a literal sense, the wolf eats the little girl, and then the huntsman breaks her out of there. But in a much more metaphoric sense, in a deeper sense, she gets devoured. She goes to the underworld, the metaphoric underworld. She goes to the dark place. This is the place of our depression. This is the place of suicidality. This is the place of bereftness, of utter sadness. She goes to the place of someone else subsuming her will. Okay. Again, it's a metaphor that holds more than the literal. And then when she's broken out, she sees the light. She comes to consciousness. What was dark and unconscious and devoured and hidden inside the wolf then comes to consciousness. Yes, very much a Hades experience. This is talked about in the Persephone story, with Persephone and Demeter. Persephone goes to the underworld. She goes to the unconscious. She goes to the dark place, to the hidden place. And it takes her mother to draw her out once a year back into consciousness, to bring into the light what was hidden. So that's why I think it's so cool what Clarissa Pinkola Estes is saying about story being the elder in psychology. Hey, a slightly twisted female, and hey, burnout queen, and hey, Stone Lacrone. We appreciate you all being here. So this again, to me, this is what I want to say that's so important about this, and the reason that I love that she says it's the elder in between psychology. Story is the elder, and what story does, what it actually does in our brains, is it makes us use the part of the brain that is pattern recognition. So remember in the beginning of this talk, when I was talking about, conceptualized identities versus our intuition and our sensation, that cognitive part of the brain that is conceptualizing versus the pattern recognition part of the brain. So if we want to practice this pattern recognition part of the brain, we can actually practice it through art, through story, through metaphor. It gets us to use this part of the brain. And that is why these older fairy tales were so important to childhood development. And what we see now in a lot of the newer stories that are coming up is they're not rich with metaphor. They're two-dimensional. Stories like, I don't know if everyone read that Brenda is a Wolf story. I have a little thing about it on my YouTube, but that story is flat. It's not rich. It's not rich with metaphor. It's a flat story. But story at its heart, what it can do is to get us to use that function. So it gets us to practice that which we want to value. So if I'm saying to you, I want you to value your intuitions, I want you to value your sense perceptions, you can't value those things by thinking about them conceptually. You have to value those things by doing it. Yeah. I'm so interested in pattern recognition and intelligence. Someone was talking to me about this to me when I was saying how brilliant Exelantix says, and they were saying it's pattern recognition. Exactly. So this pattern recognition part of our brain, this is the mammalian part of the brain, the very back of the brain. That's instinct. That's the lizard part of the brain, and then the prefrontal cortex, that's the conceptualizing part. And this middle part, this pattern recognition part, this is the part that has to do with our intuition. It has to do with our sensation. It has to do with keeping us literally safe. This is when I talk about safeguarding, when I talk about the relationship between instincts and intuition and safeguarding, that's the part of the brain I'm talking about. And that is the part of the brain I'm talking about when I'm saying that it's important to be able to name our primary awarenesses, our primary primary sensations. That's why it's important to be able to do see and say when I'm talking to a man. If I see a man, I need to say man. I don't call him a quote trans woman. I don't call him a trans identified male. I don't call him a biological male. I don't call him anything that abstracts him from what he actually is. He's a man. So I call him a man because I don't want to dissociate or untrain myself from naming my primary sensations. I want to be able to name my primary sensations with zero abstractions, because those distractions, as soon as I start abstracting and conceptualizing, it's dissociating me from that primary recognition part of me. Yeah, all forms of sound can be used for entrainment. Now, I'm not sure exactly what you mean here, so you'll need to say something else, but I do want to say something about sound. So bear with me for 1 second. I do want to say something about sound. Okay, so I want to say, okay, so there's this guy Bachelard, and I didn't bring the book down, but I luckily I have this quote that I saved on my computer, so I actually can find it rather quickly. So Bachelard is this he's a philosopher, and he says. Okay, he says the essence of life is not a quote feeling of existence, but it's a feeling of participation, a feeling of flowing onward, necessarily expressed in the terms of time and secondarily expressed in terms of space. And he calls this an auditive metaphor, a retenier. For in sound, both time and space are epitomized. If having fixed the original in our mind's eye, we ask ourselves how that new form comes alive and fills with life, we discover a new and dynamic vital category, a property of the universe called reverberation. So to me, this is something else that story does. Its images do this. Sound does this, but images do this as well. It reverberates. It's not in, wait, is it in Poetics of Space? It's in, yes, I believe it is in Poetics of Space. Damn it, I wish I brought my book down. If it's not in Poetic, yes, I think it's right. It's in the intro of Poetics of Space. It could be in the one about water, but I think you're right. I think it's in Poetics of Space. I'll write that in the show notes later. But this sense of sound, this to me also has to do with story, because for example, in the Women Who Runs with the Wolves course, the way that Cristola Pincola Estes speaks the stories, the way that she writes the stories, have a particular cadence. And this cadence again, you can only experience it, as he says in the quote, in time, in space, and then it reverberates, it goes outwards, it literally resonates into us as a sensation. So again, it comes to us in that pattern recognition form as a sensation that we experience in time. And that is this quote, this whole notion of Bachelard's is partially why I chose to name my website Little Red Reverberations, because this whole idea to me, one, it does have a little bit to do with that little red story that I love, but it also has to do with what is intimate, what we find when we come together in intimate small groups. And that's why I love these things like this course that I'm doing. And anyone, I think there's a couple of you maybe in here who came to my free course, but what we do in these small groups, what we experience in these small groups is very intimate. It feels very small, it's intimate, it's small, it's contained. Again, I love containers. Containers contain things. But they also, because they are containing things, they give it shape. Just like, this water has this shape, but if I put my coffee in here, it has this shape. So containers give a certain kind of shape to things because they are bounded. Again, it's always always about boundaries and matter for me, but they also reverberate. They have resonances. If I spoke into this cup, it would have a certain resonance. If I spoke into the other cup, it would also have a certain resonance. Containers also give resonance, and stories themselves are also containers. And I love, again, it goes back to this idea of being the elder of psychology. Stories themselves contain things, they're containers. I like this, Alicia. People never remember what you do to or for them so much as they recall how you made them feel. That is also a reverberation. I had this great mentor back when I was living in New York. And this particular mentor that I had, she had like a million modalities. Okay. So she was, I don't know what I would call her. She kind of was like one of those life coach type women, but she did a lot of things. And she did like a meditative dance, and she did like Swedish massage, and she did Reiki, and she did iridology, which was like studying people's eyes, and she did I want to say she like read the tarot, and she did astrology, and she had like she did like actual medical things, and then she did kind of mystical new agey things. She had this binder that I remember seeing at her house, and I just remember like flipping through this binder of all these things that she did, and I was like, oh my gosh, she has so many modalities, she does so many things. And I asked her, I was like, how do you know what modality to do with what client? I was very curious about this. I was like, you have so many modalities. So what do you do? And this goes back to what Alicia just said earlier. So the thing that she said to me, and this has always stood out to me, she said, it doesn't matter. She said, it doesn't matter the modality that I use with my clients, because what matters is I sit with them, I hold my resonance, and that resonance vibrates or resonates into them. Because ultimately, this is very true in psychology a lot of the time, but even in disciplines like life coaching, or when people are good at it, they are holding a vibration that their client can resonate with. So they can find maybe a certain peace or a kind of integrity or a curiosity, or whatever it is. It resonates with those who you're being this with, and this is true in our lives as well. These qualities resonate. So taking it back, as we're going around and around, but taking it back to these teachers that are working with our kids and teaching our kids to dissociate from their primary awarenesses, to dissociate from their bodies, they are putting a kind of anxiety within our child. They are anxious about themselves. And I think, anyone who follows these teachers, I'm using that term loosely. I mean, it is their job. I guess they are teachers. They're just teaching very bad things. So they have a kind of, if you notice them, they have a kind of a franticness, they have a kind of anxiety, they have a kind of, when they speak, you can see their shoulders are raised, and their energy is very anxious. This is what they're modeling. This is what they're doing. They're insecure. They're both insecure, and they're validation seeking. So they're teaching our kids to seek validation externally. So kids are being taught not to go inside, to come back to yourself, not to go inside, but to go external, to seek external sources of, whether that external source is an expert, whether that who is telling you what is correct about the world, or whether that external source is someone saying back to you what you need to see about yourself. But ultimately, at its heart, Yeah, I like this. The truth of the world is rooted in observable reality, and that is comforting. That is literally grounding. That is literally grounding. Okay. Um, and what I what I think, what I feel, what I sense, what I believe is needed is is an ability to come to sensation. So in the workshops that I've done, I haven't done them recently, but I used to do workshops with women. Some of you may know I have a background in psychology. I also have a background in theater, and I used to travel and do a lot of workshops that had to do with what I talk about, embodied awareness. I've shifted to a lot more activism in the last couple of years, but this is part of my background, and this is part of what I do. And for me, this work, this embodied work, was helping women to attune to their own sensations, to attune to their own body, to attune to their own intuition, their own pattern recognition, their own sensations, and feeling out for themselves where emotion is trapped in the body, or where discomfort, or um, and getting sort of learning to follow the body, learning to pay attention to the body. And I think this is something that all of us are wildly missing, because here's the thing about our culture. Our culture has externalized technology. There is a lot of money to be made in externalizing technology. There's a lot of money to be made in this identity movement because it's externalizing. There's money to be made in any external technology. There's money to be made in selling phones because it's an externalization of technology. And once it's externalized, you can sell it and mass market it and make lots and lots of profit from it. There is not a lot of money to be made in valuing our internal technologies. And I would say that our intuition, our sense perceptions, our primary awarenesses, our instincts, our ability to have emotional resiliency, and integrity and equilibrium, these are capacities. We can have these. And these capacities are undervalued because they are not marketable. And also because people who have these things, if I have internal integrity, and emotional equilibrium, then I am much less susceptible to being a good consumer. I am much less susceptible to the doctrine of identity or whatever the fad is of the day. I am less susceptible to it because I have this self reliance, this self trust, a trust in my own body, a trust in my own senses. So to me, I observe that the world does not want kids to have these things. Kids who have these things are not as good of consumers. They are not as good of little workers. These, kids who have internal integrity are much more likely to question the system and push back against the system. And this is not a desired trait that, in general, I mean, I desire to see kids have this trait. I know those of us in this chat desire to see kids have this trait, but the world itself does not desire them to have this trait. I'm going to see what this says. When children realize that a sound they always hear is actually a word, and that word is connected to something real that they understand, that is comforting. And they can grow and to understand that and communicate a shared reality. Exactly. And this is to point out that reality is shared. And they are right now being dissociated from this ability to find comfort and twisted. I think you were not here when I was speaking about how what you just said, ultimately this ability to name reality is a way to claim reality. It's a way to claim bodily autonomy. Um, so it's a way of claiming authority about the world around you. Yeah, anyone who values money above all else has no concept of what is profitable. Interesting. I would like to hear more about that. I mean, I would think they would think the widgets are profitable. Excessive. Contumaciousness is still bad though. So balance again. I don't know that word. I actually, I don't, I'm going to have to look up that word. Um, mm. So anyway, so this this is all. I don't. How long have I been here? Oh my god, I've been here an hour. Shoot, I was like, I literally was like, I'm just gonna come on and do a 15-minute live. I'm so freaking long winded. This is why I edit. This is why when I make my other videos, I edit them because I'm very long-winded. Um, thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone, ladies, and some men who have been here. I so appreciate you, and I so appreciate you going down this path with me because I do think it's really important. So I think that that's why while I critique the identity movement, um, you'll see in my longer form work, like the work that I put up on my YouTube, you'll see that I really try to value um, the values that I wish to see in the world because I spend so much of my time fighting. I spend so much of my time in activism. I do my boots on the ground stuff. I friggin' fight my town. I go to my city councils and I fight, 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 and I stand up for women and girls. I stand up for kids. However, I wanted to come on the live today because I wanted I want to really start to speak more and more about this other side of me because I think one, it's an important part of like me and who I am, but it's also a really important part of what I think is a great strategy to come at this because we need to come at what we are seeing in front of us. We need to look at the values of what we see in front of us. What are the values of the identity movement? And we need to come at it with the alternate values. Alicia, I don't think there's too many men here. I did see one man earlier, but I don't see him making comments. But I think it's okay because we're all online. We're just all online. um, so if we're saying, okay, these are the values of the identity movement and these are the contrasting values, these are the values that would heal what we're seeing. So over here in the identity movement, what I see is dissociation, body dissociation. VF555, deception, confusion, manipulation for sure. But I see, so we see dissociation, we see compartmentalization. So you're literally dissociated from your body. Your body is a collection of interchangeable parts. It's a way of objectifying self. It's a cognitive dissonance because I'm detached from reality. And it's an abstraction. So dissociation, cognitive dissonance, compartmentalization, objectification, um, commodifying. It's also commodification because it's for profit and interchangeable, and I buy and I sell parts. So it's, yeah, meat Legos. That's a great way of talking about it. Yeah, I do appreciate you here, Joe, so much. Lego people, meat Legos, exactly. Ghost in the machine, all of those phrases, ghost in the machine, all of that kind of things. It's a dissociation. So what are the healing values to come at this? So if I'm noticing these are the symptoms that I'm seeing in front of me, what are the values that bring healing to those things, that balance them, that are the antithesis? So those are the values of intuition, instinct, sense, perceptions, my eyes, my ears, my touch, my taste, knowing that, containers contain things, boundaries, internal integrity, emotional equilibrium. Um, these are the things that I wish to value into the world. So this is why I used to teach these things with women when I did my workshops. And I am planning to eventually do these again. The main location that I had used to use to do this is no more. But I am trying to create my own location on my property. I have a little space that it'll may take a little minute. Um, but I am trying to do that here. And that is also, so for those of you who are interested, I know some of you have already signed up and there is still more space, but this is what I'm trying to do with some of these courses that I'm doing. This is what I'm doing with the Women Who Runs with the Wolves course. And the reason that I like it so much, and I'm going to come to your question, biblical, the reason that I like this book so much is because it is a practice. And that's what I liked about doing my workshops. And I will offer these workshops again at some point. I need to find a different location. But the reason that I like the workshops that use theater, the reason that I liked this particular book is because it is a practicing. So it's not just looking at these traits of embodiment or intuition and imagination and thinking about them in a conceptual capacity. It's a way of doing them, of practicing them, of skill building in these areas, of making of reinforcing our existing capacities to do these things and making those capacities even stronger. So these are muscles that we can flex. These inner capacities are like muscles, and we can learn to build them and have resiliency in these capacities. So ultimately, we can share these capacities with others, and we can mainly so we can help our children do it. Yeah. um yeah, children do have a love-hate relationship with boundaries. They don't want boundaries, but they need boundaries. I do think it's important. I do think there is some great parents doing homeschooling right now, and I do think this is a potential remedy. Yeah, I think it is. I don't think it is the only remedy, but I definitely see it as a remedy. And let me tell you a story, an early childhood development story about boundaries that I think you will all connect with. So there was this great story in this early childhood book that I will never forget. And it was this experiment that they did in the field, in a literal field. So it was field work in a literal field. And the story is they put this playground, they put a play structure in the middle of a giant field. And they bust in a group of kids, and they did this a couple of times. It's field work, you repeat the study. And they told the kids, you can play anywhere you want in this giant field. You can play anywhere you want. The kids played right next to the play structure. They played really tight on top of the play structure. They sort of clung to the play structure and kept all of their play, whether it was tag or whether it was jump rope or whatever else they had there, kickball. They played it really close to the play structure. Then they did the same experiment with a number of the same groups of kids, where they had the play structure in the middle of the field, but they put a giant fence around the play structure, almost as big as the field itself. They put a fence. And as soon as that fence was there, the kids played all the way up to the edges of the fence in all directions. They played everywhere, everywhere. So this is a story and a literal field experiment to say that kids feel safe with a boundary. Kids feel safe with a boundary. Kids require boundaries for their safety. They understand that they are not yet autonomous. They cannot survive on their own. They cannot leave their parents' house. They cannot survive without an adult. And so they are always seeking boundaries. So it's a give and a take. In child development, you come through all these stages. So kids go through all these different stages where they flex their will, and then they push to the edge of that will, and then they hopefully get a responsible and respectful boundary. Now, of course, some parents are a little too tight with their boundaries, some parents are a little too loose with their boundaries, but hopefully most good parents are coming to a respectable middle ground of having a good healthy boundary, because kids learn autonomy and they learn how to have boundaries by having boundaries given to them. So kids who have boundaries at home learn to maintain their boundaries when they're out in the world. If you don't have boundaries at your house, you do not learn physically in yourself how to have boundaries. So kids who grow up without boundaries, kids whose either parents work all the time and are not at home, or whose parents are abusive, um, and who do not give them boundaries, they cannot, it is very hard for them as an adult, and they have to go through a lot of work to learn boundaries. Yeah, there's, kids appreciate a kind of strictness. There's another story that I that happened to me when I was nannying, where this was very upsetting, but a there was a child, or sorry, there was a parent, the dad of this family that I knew in New York. The dad was mugged, and it was a very, unfortunately, it was a very bad mugging. He had to be hospitalized. It was horrible. And at afterwards, of course, the mom was shaken up, he was shaken up, the kids were shaken up. And afterwards, the parents did this really weird thing where they were if you feel like going to school, you can go to school, but if you don't, if you're not feeling ready to go to school, you don't have to. Oh, your piano lesson is today, but if you don't feel like it, you don't have to. And I kept trying to tell these parents, I kept trying to be like, when I was there, I was like, it's just like the every time Amy's here, it's just like, you have nap time just like usual, we have lunch just like usual, because I knew they needed structure and routine. um but I saw it break down because I was reading a story to the 6-year-old. I was reading that Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. Like, oh, you'll go here. Oh, you'll go there. Oh, you'll go everywhere. Oh, the places you'll go. I don't know if you all know this Dr. Seuss book. And all of a sudden he started to cry. He was 6 and he started to cry. And I was like, what is happening, friend? Like, what is going on? And he's just crying. And he was like, no, 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 no. He was like, the mommy and the daddy will decide. The mommy and the daddy will decide. And I was just like, yep, book closed. I was like, the mom and the dad will decide. They decide. They set the structure. They set the boundaries. They create the thing. He knows he is loose and unable to cope with the world, and he needs boundaries to feel contained. He needs structure to feel contained, to feel safe. Kids feel safe with a boundary. And this real life experience was very clear to me. They need that. And this is, I don't know if you all know Jennifer Thomas, who is Rev Fem Street Beat. She is one of our primary on the ground activists. And I know we have Pinwheel and Slightly Twisted today, who also do a lot of boots on the ground activism. But Jay Thomas has really spoken about, she's done a lot of interacting with some of these young TRAs. And the thing that she always says is that they come to her, they go to her. If any of you know her, I mean, she's a beautiful woman, but she also is a mom. She looks like a mom. She is a mom. You can be a beautiful mom, and she is one. But they go to her because she says they read her mom energy, and they are coming to her seeking a no. They are seeking a boundary. They are seeking someone to tell them no. And I notice that, and I don't know if you all notice that. I get sometimes in my DMs, these younger TRAs who are coming into my DMs and trying to explain to me how a man is a woman, and I'm firm with them. I'm not, I mean, if they're not rude to me, I'm not rude to them. I'm nice to them, but I'm firm to them. And I am telling them, no, no, a man is a man. And there's nothing that you can say that will make me not understand that. I will never stop understanding that men and women are different. Nothing will make me stop knowing and seeing and understanding what I know. Nothing will make me stop trusting the reality of my own eyes and ears. Um, no. And I do think that a lot of these young people seek this. No, they are seeking a boundary. They are seeking someone to set this down for us. We need this, okay? And they need this. We all need boundaries. Women need boundaries around our bodies, but these young, identitarian activists who want to abstract everything from themselves, they need that container, they need someone to tell them no. And I think that's why women, I mean, this women are involved in this movement because a lot of what's happening is it's the outcome affects us most greatly, so we're involved in it. But I think it's really interesting and essential that we be involved in it, because typically, this is not like true across the board, but typically they say the rationalizing functions, the logical functions, the externalizing functions, these are sort of typical male. Now we all have these capacities. These are capacities that we all have. So I'm not saying like, men are X and women are Y. I mean, it's the opposite. Women are X and men are Y. Sorry, I'm killing myself. But so to say that men, they like in a lot of like Jungian psychology or yin and yang of the East, these rationalizing functions are, male, or what they say, animus, and the anima, or the yang, is the intuitive capacity, the imaginative capacity, the emotionally processing capacity, the creative capacity, the pattern recognition capacity. These are typically the feminine, and it's like these are the feminine, capital, not feminine like, oh, makeup is feminine or high heels are feminine, not feminine in like that kind of like mundane level, but like in that archetypal level, that bigger, grander world level. These are our capacities. So I do think, one, this is why we must value these capacities, and why it is ultimately primary to women to share and value these values for the rest of the world, to put them out into the world, for others to see. I do think this is, in a way, women's work. This is a women's work. So, um, yes, Sonia, thank you for being here. I have seen your comments. I haven't put up comments in a minute because I've been off in a world, but I thank you all for coming to this world with me. And what did I name this again? I named this talk, Connecting the Dots, Identity to Intuition. So I hope I hope that I've done that. I think I have done that for you today. Um, and it's really, I wanted to underline, I guess, with this talk, um, because I think I have spoken about some of these things before, but I don't think I've spoken about why I think they are so important. I think I've spoken about it in terms of safeguarding, but I wanted to speak about it in terms of the other reasons why it is so important. So, now is the time where I am going to plug. So I am going to say, if you didn't already, do please like this video. If you didn't already, do please hit my bell and be a subscriber. It's a very easy, non-financed way to support me, is to be a subscriber. That really helps. And I do want to say, if anyone can, you can support me at my PayPal. It helps me with my activism. It helps me pay for the live streaming, what I do when I put out the live videos of our speakers corners and free speech events. So that it really helps me. And I also do want to say, and this is one that I love, is please join me for this course, because as I said before, the course is one, it's a way for all of us to connect in person. So and if you're, even if you're not ready, also, by the way, these courses that I'm going to give, it's a 14-week long series, but each week is a standalone. So if you even just want to come to one and try it out, you can. There is on my website, you can see that you can sign up for an individual class if you don't want to sign up for the whole thing, if you just want to test it out and see if you like it. And also, I'm going to offer that each week because each of these chapters are all different stories. So the way that this book works is that it's all different stories that have to do with what she calls the wild woman archetype. This archetype has to do, and archetypes are patterns of consciousness that happen in our collective psyche, like the mother, the warrior, the lover. So the wild woman archetype has to do with our instincts and our intuitions, which is, of course, why I particularly like this book. But why I think it's particularly so cool to do it in a group is because that group is itself a container. And what I'm doing with the course is I'm doing some chapter analysis, but I'm also doing group discussion so that we can take the images and the feelings and the patterns in the story, and we can share with one another how those patterns are acting themselves in our lives, so we can come together and find community and grow these capacities together. Because I just can't underscore enough how important I think these capacities are. If there is someone here, if you just literally cannot afford it, do please reach out to me, because I don't want anyone not to come because they can't afford it. This is a way of myself helping me support myself, but I also think it's too urgent, it's too important. And if you are out there and you really feel like I am drawn to come, I feel that I must come, just contact me. We'll work something out, we'll figure something out. I'm not going to turn people away because of money. This is too important. It's just a way for me to do what I love, and also it's a way to support my activism that I feel is transactional. I give. It's a give and receive. I'm giving and receiving at the same time. We have to all. This is this is part of embodiment as well, is balanced giving and receiving. And I do know, as women, my God, I mean, as all humans, but women, mothers, we give and we give and we give and we give. And if we're not giving and receiving in balance, then we feel depleted. So this is a way of me doing that give back, because I want to give with my activism. And so this is a way of doing that reciprocity. Uh, so thank you all. Oh, and the other thing that you can do that is that does not cost you anything is leave a comment. If you leave, I know that you're in the chat right now, but if you actually also leave a physical comment, that is also very useful to the algorithm. All right, friends. And feel free. I'm Known Heretic on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Amy E. Souza on my Facebook. You can email me at theknownheretic@gmail.com. I do encourage anyone who wants to reach out. You can absolutely reach out. And thank you, all of you, for being here with me in the chat today. It was this was just sort of a spontaneous chat. So I appreciate it. We are going to win this. Our activism is important. Our emotional health and integrity is important. Kelly J. Keene is coming. We're gonna talk about this. I'm gonna talk about this in a live as well. Um, Kelly J. Keene is coming, and I hope that we will all come out and do more lives. We are going to get this done together. Thank you all. I appreciate you. Bye.